What's going on, guys? We're here today with episode 11 of Coffee and Real Estate with Manuel here, Manuel Mata.
What's up, guys? How's it going? So we're going on to our 11th episode already. And we've got a great one. So you want to make sure you stay tuned for the end because we are going to talk a little bit about what to watch out for in case you run into something that might throw some red flags and, want to avoid scams. So definitely stay tuned to the end to make sure you avoid all those things and see those red flags. But first of all, what is the topic today?
Today, we're going to talk a little bit about non-traditional homes. What type of homes are there out there besides your traditional home built, in the city on slab with, framing? What are your options? What to look out for when you're looking at those homes? Things you might run into and make sure to look out for when you're trying to purchase a home like that. Yeah. And I think it's important right now because we see a lot of people moving in Houston away from the city, right? They're moving out. And as you go out, you start to find a lot more of these non-traditional homes, different kinds of roofs, things like that. But before we leave the city, I think we could talk a little bit about non-traditional in the city where it's still a traditionally built home, but it's labeled as a historic home because it's a little different. And you got to look out for a little bit more than you would on a traditional home.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're looking at a historic home, you're going to have a lot of different things that come into play. First, if it's in a historic zone, you're going to have to be bounded by the guidelines in the historic district. And we were talking a little bit earlier is that Houston really doesn't have any zoning, but what it does have is certain pockets do have deed restrictions or guidelines in how you reconstruct. So you can't go in there and buy a 1910 or 1920s home, a bungalow style home, Victorian style home, and completely redo it. Nope. No, you have to abide by those guidelines. And so what's another thing that you want to watch out for? First, you got to abide by the guidelines.
Yeah, abide by the guidelines. I think something important to know is typically, we can't go through the whole guidelines here, but typically what I've seen in historic homes is the exterior has the harshest guidelines because they want to keep the look and feel of that historic building. So a lot of times you could do a lot more on the inside, modernize it, make it look, way different than what it looks like now on the inside. But the outside, you're very limited. So if you're trying to make the outside of your home kind of look very modern, then you might not want a historic home.
You need to keep the facade of the home.
Yes.
So if you look at the home from the outside, it's a 1920s house, right? Yep. But you can walk in there and you'll still find all the modern amenities inside the house, right?
Yep.
So you can definitely do something and play with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when you come into something like that, what are some of the pitfalls that an investor or a homeowner might fall once they go into a certain neighborhood?
I think the biggest thing that investors do when they purchase a historic home is, one, they don't know it's historic, right? Like somehow it didn't get mentioned, they bought it blind, whatever happened, they don't know, right? The second thing that they could do wrong is build an estimate of what it's going to take to repair it or update it based on traditionally renovating a home versus taking into consideration some of the extra steps they're going to have to take to keep it historic. Bring in additional engineers or bring in more inspections as it's happening because there's going to be more of a hawk's eye on it from the city than traditionally there would be. So just not taking the historic part of it into consideration when deciding what they're going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so typically you want to find that information out way before you go into contract, definitely while you're in your option period. And one of the ways is to make sure you enlist the help of a good realtor who knows the neighborhood, who knows what to watch out for, who knows that, hey, this house may fall in those deed restrictions or in the historic preservation zone that the Houston has assigned. So you want to know that you work with a good realtor that knows exactly what it is. Yep. At the very least, when you do your option, you do your due diligence, be sure to be clearing all of these little guidelines out so that when it comes down to construction and you go down to the permitting office, you're not shut down and your project is done, right? And a lot of times we investors value like the after repair value is on what they imagined what they were going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so they base the value on, I'm going to add more square footage, or I'm going to go another story up, or I'm going to do all these things. And that's where they purchase on the after repair value, right? Based on their after repair value. If the project gets shut down, or they have to scale down, they might lose their profit and they might even come up to a loss. So
Yep.
be careful. So that's one of the tips right there.
Yeah,
Sip and tip. So that is it. Work with a realtor that knows exactly what the historic guidelines are, so that you know when you turn in your ultimate plans, you can accomplish that. Then you're looking at the actual after repair value, after build value. Right?
Yep. And I'd say another tip, sips and tips, is you want to know ahead of time what the end buyer expects in that area. For example, something that you don't normally think about is it's historic, right? So there's a certain type of buyer that wants to buy a historic home. They're willing to pay extra for it because of the historic portion of it. But one other thing, a lot of times when you do those historic homes, is if the outside is going to keep the facade of like the 1920s, that's cool. But then they expect there to be some kind of well-known designer on the inside, whether so that they could say, you know, like this fireplace was designed by Frego Shonkro, or, you know, like whatever it is. So a lot of times when you do the inside, you need to have key features that are designed by a well-known artist or designer in the area, because that's expected in some areas. And you don't think of that if you've never done that before. So that's another tip I would say. Know your end buyer and what they expect.
Right. In this historic homes, even though you are modernizing the interior, you don't expect to walk in there and see, you know, a suburban style home.
Nope.
No. Even though you're talking about modern features, but we're talking modern features with a historic twist.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is.
A little more artsy.
A little more art.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely have a little bit more character to it. Again, just because it's new doesn't mean that you're going to walk into a traditional suburban style home. And this is why it's called historic. This is why people pay a premium for these style homes.
Yeah.
All right. So what's another non-traditional home that we're seeing that a lot of buyers do it?
So I think as you move away from the city and you get more into having land, acreage, you run into mobile homes a lot.
Mobile homes.
And there are mobile homes within the city, but as you go out, you know, you're having to look out for things outside of the norm, where you're not connected to city water, city sewer anymore. Now you got to look into, you know, septic systems. What kind of septic system? What kind of septic system do they allow? If they require an aerobic septic system, what's the smallest amount of land you got to have to do that? You know, and then you have wells. You know, is there a well on the property? Is it specific to your property? Is it a shared well within the community? Multiple shared wells? There's just so many more things that go into play that you want to make sure you're looking out for. If you have an experienced realtor, they're going to be able to pull up the addenda to that home if it's on the market and tell you a little more information about what's being disclosed pertaining to like the well, the septic, or look into what it would look like to install something like that, because sometimes you're buying these homes with these old septic systems that are no good anymore. You just need to do a new system, and that's going to be a whole different process.
That's tens of thousands of dollars right there.
Tens of thousands of dollars, yes.
And so one of the reasons that a lot of people may look into it is, of course, the home prices are increasing every single year. And this is an alternative to those home prices.
Yeah.
A lot of times mobile home prices are still within an affordable range for most people. And it's an option for most people. And so you start looking into those things. But of course, all those things that Cesar just mentioned come to play when it comes to financing.
Yep.
And so you may find the perfect property in the perfect spot that you want, and it is completely, it's completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Livable.
Yep.
Right? It's livable. It's in great condition. But then we have those certain things that just going to stop the financing in place. It doesn't have a septic system, or it needs to be something to be updated, right?
Yep.
And then it stops right there, right?
Yeah, and they've been recently. We'll do probably multiple tips here. They've been recently requiring a lot more on mobile homes on the lender side. I think an important thing to know is if you're pre-approved for a certain amount, you can't just start looking at mobile homes. You need to make sure that lender even lends on mobile homes. So a few things is typically they'll lend on double wide mobile homes. There's only specific lenders that lend on single wide mobile homes, right? And then on top of that, they're requiring engineers reports now on these homes to sign off that it's set properly and that it's not going anywhere, especially with insurance being more involved and being higher. Everything needs to fit the bill so that it can be insured, and there's no issues with financing a home that's not going to be insured.
Yeah, and so there's a difference between when it's set correctly on a foundation on the property, where it now converts to real property.
Yep.
We say real property versus a completely mobile home, where it can still be mobile. I mean, that's the name of the house, the home, but it could still be mobile at the time, meaning that it could still be movable, and we don't want that.
Lenders will not lend on it if it's got the hitch on there, where once they finance it, you can strap it on and move it out. Yeah, they're not going to finance that. The other thing that they typically will look for when they're looking at these is, outside of the engineer's report, they don't want it to have been moved more than once. So if you bought it, put it on your property, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to keep my home but sell the land. I found a bigger piece of land I want to move to. You move it to that piece of land. That's the one time it's allowed to move, and they'll still finance it.
And so a lot of times people buy mobile homes and they're financed just the structure itself, and they'll move it into one of where they can rent the lot, and they may move to another lot. So that would apply to the situation, right?
Yeah.
So you can only move it from one place to another. So if you buy a house and just the manufactured home itself, and you're renting the lot for a while, and you think in the future, I want to buy my own lot, don't move spots more than once.
Yeah. If not,
don't
try
move
to sell
until you buy the lot
at that point. Yeah.
And don't jump from one rental lot to another.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say don't do that. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know. So you definitely don't want to buy one and then say, hey, I found another community that I want to move to before I buy my land and place it permanently. No, you just got to make sure you stay there, stick it out until you find your permanent land and go out that way. Okay. Yeah. That's a really great tip for individuals.
Outside of that, I mean, you have your ranch and your farm homes, right? And you hear the word homesteading a lot more. Really what they're differentiating between homesteading and a traditional farm is, a farm is technically going to be where it's commercialized. The primary purpose of it is to produce goods to be able to pretty much sell and earn a living, right? Now, when that farm becomes your homestead, your primary residence, they're calling that homesteading now, which is just the process of saying, hey, this is my primary residence. I live here. The purpose of all this is not to make money. I might still make some money off of it, but it's more just a farm that I live at as my primary residence.
That just sustains my life.
Sustains my life. Yeah.
Okay.
Versus I use this to make some money or come visit, but my homestead is actually in the city, Right. So no, homesteading, you're out there and that's where you live. That's your main primary residence.
And a lot of people are moving out, looking for more and more land out that way. So there's a lot of regulations out there. And I'm sure that there's also acreage restrictions on what it is that you buy. You can't, if you want to go the commercial route or say the ag route, agricultural route, there are minimum acreage requirements on that.
Yeah. And it's always county-based too.
It's county-based,
not
right?
Nationwide or anything like that. Yeah.
So you have to go enlist the help of a good realtor that knows what the county restrictions are if you're looking for land, and depending on what you want to do with the land, right? Some people want to do the homestead and say, I just want to have property. Some people say, hey, I want to have so many acres so that I can grow or I can raise cattle or what have you.
Yep.
And each county is going to have its own restrictions on how it's going to be zoned or taxed or described as, right? And you want to make sure that when you buy that property, it is going to allow you to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because, Manuel says it all the time, find a good realtor, right? And that could just come off as wanting to promote the fact that they should use us, right? And,
right.
And guess what? You shouldn't always use us because finding a good realtor sometimes means finding someone local to that specific area, because they're going to really, really know, they might live across the street. They might have done everything you want to do. Somebody local that really knows the area. We know some areas outside of the city, but we don't know every area. So there might be times where we say, hey, we're going to find you an agent there and hand you off to them because they really know the area. Because what you don't want is to use your cousin or your tia or uncle or, somebody that you just want to be loyal to, and then they don't know what they're doing and you get yourself into a lot of trouble.
Definitely. Yeah. No, and I know that you want, again, Cesar mentioned that, yes, of course, I'm always preaching that. But the one thing that I do want to specify, and I do want to back that up, is yes, there are going to be sections in the Houston area that I don't specialize. Another non-traditional housing that we can, talk about in the future is beach property, beachfront property.
Oh yeah.
I don't go to the island, Galveston. I don't go to Galveston. I have had clients say, hey, I want to buy a beach house. I want to buy a beachfront property. I've always referred that out to a local Galveston agent because it's a completely, even though it's only 45 minutes away, completely different market. One that I'm not, well versed in terms of wind damage. Beachfront property has its own addenda. All these things have different things. Yeah. How you compare values in each one. Are you using it for Airbnb purposes or short-term rental purposes? Are you using it just as a second home? All these things come into play.
Is it on stilts?
Exactly. What kind of foundation is it on?
Yeah.
Right. How far from the beach is it on? How far is it in a zoning area where it constantly floods? All these things come into play. And so, yes, but we know, if you come to us, we know the right person to connect you with when it comes to that. Whether you're buying farmland, or you're buying a historic home, or whether you're buying a beachfront property, we have the right connections to be able to help you out and make sure that you are making the right decision when you buy that house. And so that's one of the, I think I wanted to leave them with that bit of information, is to watch out for those. And, if someone's promising all these things, you want to watch out for those.
Yeah, you want to watch out for those people.
You want to watch out for those things.
They need to know that they have limitations. And one thing we didn't tell you guys is we're really trying hard to limit these conversations to about 15 minutes. So if you heard the timer, that's what it is. Obviously, we went over. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off there. But we're going to leave maybe a decision up to you guys if we get enough people to vote for something. We came up with potentially what we want to speak about next week, right? So one of the things is scams, real estate scams, things that are happening out there, so that you could be on the lookout for what that looks like. And we'll do it at some point, but if you don't want it next week, maybe the following week. The other option is we have one of our agents here in the office that has just been still consistently locking up deals on the MLS. If you talk to a lot of investors, they tell you there's no deals on the MLS, but she's still consistently doing it. So we might bring her in to have a quick discussion with her as far as how she finds these deals, what she looks for, what that conversation with the agent might look like. So if you guys could do us a favor and tell us, would you rather hear about real estate scams or
investor specials?
Investor specials on the market, not off market. With that, I think we can conclude the episode.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys next week.